Alright, what I'm going to do next to this CT90 is try to get the front brakes adjusted and working right. I'm going to take them apart and clean everything up. And you see right now we can turn the wheel and I can squeeze the handle and I get just a very little bit of brake. But that's all I get. So we're going to lube up the cable and take this front brakes apart. Take a look at them, see if everything looks like it's okay or if the pads are completely worn out. Clean everything up, check the bearings and everything in it as well, and put it back together. Doesn't look like there's any bearing play that I can feel here at the wheel, and we'll probably change the fork oil as well. So gonna get started on that. Taking the front wheel off and taking the brake assembly off. Okay, what I've done so far is I took the handle loose at the top, took the handle off. I don't know if you really need to do that, but I want to lube that cable really well, so I wanted to go ahead and remove that cable up there at the top. And then I took the cable loose down here off the wheel. Let's see if the camera will pick it up. And so I want to take all this apart. Now the speedo cable, it's dripping some oil out of it, so it looks like it's been lubed, but the brake cable is super dry, and you know, the brake lever here on the wheel itself moves really free, and seems to be applying the brakes, but the handle is so hard to squeeze, and I think it's just because this cable is so dry. And so we're going to lube all that up. I'm going to take the wheel off, check the shoes, make sure they're not worn out, and we'll see what we find out when we take this off. Okay, I took the front wheel apart. The brake pads don't look terrible. There's still a lot of pad left on them, but they're glazed all up, and it looks like somebody really lubed up this speedo gear a lot, and it might have sprayed out and got on some of the stuff in here. Actually, it doesn't look like that. It just looks like the brakes are glazed really bad. So I'm gonna just clean those up a little bit, clean up the drum inside and put it back together. Maybe take these shoes apart and lube them a little bit, so make sure they're moving well, because they're pretty tight, which they're supposed to be, but everything inside is on the pads themselves are really dry. So I'm just going to try to lube this up a little bit, clean it up a little, and see if it see if we can take this glaze off of these shoes a little bit, and clean the drum up, see if we can get these brakes to work. Alright, I don't know if you can tell by the camera angle, but I cleaned up the glaze in the crap inside with some brake clean and a little bit of sandpaper. Just knocked the glaze off the pads that had built up on it, and then cleaned them with some brake clean just to get all the oil off of it. I'm going to clean the outside of this, and I think I'm going to go ahead and try to clean up the wheel. If there's a little bit of rust in some parts of the wheel, I'm going to try to hit that with some real fine steel wool. Just try to knock that little rust off of it. Maybe polish these wheels up since I have them off. The spokes are in pretty bad shape, but we'll see how they come out. Alright, got the wheels somewhat cleaned up. This is a trail bike, so I'm not going nuts on it. My recommendation is leave the spokes alone unless you have a kid that is restricted and needs something to do, and you want to waste a lot of time cleaning up the spokes. Have them do it. But other than that, I would leave them alone. Not going to do that again. Clean the wheel up a little bit. I think it looks a little bit better. Got the brakes cleaned up, got the speedo drive lubed up a little bit. I'm going to put this back in. Just make sure that you put the groove right here and on the fork groove. or the nipple there, so that your speedo will work and it won't just spin. So I'm gonna put this back together, and then we're gonna try to adjust up the brakes. I lube the brake cable with some, I use chain wax. They said you can use it on cables and things as well. I've been using that on a couple other bikes, and it seems to really work well. It gets in there, lubes everything, and then gives it a nice little coating that seems like the cables slide really well with this. I may need to do a little bit more on that cable to just kind of make sure it's all run through. I sprayed some through, and it kind of was dripping out a little bit of the other end. That's what I like to do to make sure they're lubed up, but might squirt a little bit more in it before I put everything back together. One other thing, when you're putting this wheel in and back together, make sure you put this spacer on the right side of the bike before you put everything back together. Let's see here. Just gonna get it to line up here and not be totally in the way of the camera. Alright, get that in. Put your axle back in. I'm going to rub just a little bit of grease on the axle just to make it slide in a little bit better and keep it from rusting up. Just going to give this just a little love tap to go through. Not beating on it, just kind of tapping it through. Yeah, the way I have it in this lift here, it doesn't want to go through. Alright, I'm going to move the camera and see if we can get this through all the way. Alright, the torque specs on this is 25.3 foot-pounds all the way up to like 28 foot-pounds, so I'm going to torque it to 26. That seems awful tight. There it goes. Alright. So that's torqued on there. Now we're going to work on getting the brakes hooked back up and adjust all that. Alright, got the brake cable run back through here on the housing. We're going to put the rest of it together. The spring goes on. We've got the little barrel. It goes into the arm. Feed that through. And we got this little lock collar. We're just going to put this on until we get the handle hooked back up. So it's not pulling too much pressure on there, so we can't get the handle back in at the top. Okay, I don't know if you can see too much from this angle, but I like to just put a little bit of grease on my barrels into the brake line there, so it gives it a little bit of lubrication in it. Let's see if we can get this back on here. Get a little bit of play in there. Same with this bolt. I'm just going to rub a little bit of grease on it. Not going crazy with it, just give it a little bit of lubrication. Get that lined up. A 10mm socket and just thread this back through. Tap it through enough to get the nut on. It's not threaded all the way through like that, but it just helps the nut to feed through, or the bolt to feed through to be able to get the nut on. It's hard working with gloves, but I don't like getting grease and oil and all the solvents you use to clean on my skin. Everything in your skin absorbs it and goes through all your body and liver and everything else, and I don't want any kind of crazy cancer or anything like that, so I usually always wear gloves to try to keep this stuff off my hands. Alright, so I'm just going to snug that up a little bit. There we go. Seems to move okay. Alright, now we'll go back down to where the lower brake is. Okay, I did have to take this bolt back off of here and take it out of the arm because it didn't give me enough room to get the cable on. So now we're going to hook this back up. It didn't give me enough free play at the top to get the cable on, I guess I should say. That makes sense. Adjust that in a little bit. Alright, it sounds like it's just barely touching the wheel right now. Oh yeah, we got brakes now. And you can actually move the handle. It's going to be a little bit tighter. Rubbing against the stand a little bit. So. Oh yeah, we got brakes now. Loosen it just a little bit. Give me, so it's not dragging quite too much. All right, should be good there. Alright, and put the speedo cable back in. Let's go and get on the other side of the camera here. Sorry, I'm working in a tight area. Small garage. Alright, so I got the wheel cleaned up a little bit. Like I said, that was not a very enjoyable thing to do, and I didn't go nuts with it. It's a trail bike. I just tried to knock some of that crud off of the spokes and that surface rust that was on there. I know this is a trail bike. It's going to be out in the woods in the dirt and everything else, and I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this bike or if I'm just going to sell it, but I want to do the maintenance on it and you know, have it right and have it looking decent and have it to last another 50 years. It's hitting on the stand here, that's why there's no free play on the wheel. But alright, so I'm gonna check a few things here and we'll see what we're going to do next on this bike. Okay, I just thought I'd do a little summary on this. For the front brakes, all you really need, 17mm socket to take the axle off, torque wrench when you put it back on, a 10mm socket to take the handle off, and so you get enough free play to take this cable off and lube the cable. I use chain wax is what I use on my cables, and it seems to work well. So I just took the axle off, cleaned up the wheel, cleaned up the brakes with some brake clean and some sandpaper just to kind of scuff and get that glaze off of it. I wouldn't recommend going really sanding hard on that. I don't know if these are asbestos brakes because they're old. And just cleaned up everything inside with some brake clean. I put the cable back in underneath here. You have to just pull the spring back, get it back in the little holder here, and you know, just adjusted the brakes. Like I said, I just kind of did it by feel right now. I'll take it out and ride it and see if we have to do any little adjustments on it. But you know, just doing the cable, just putting some lube on the cable, it really made a big difference. This cable was real hard to pull and just wasn't sliding very well in the case. But like I said, just put a lot of that chain wax through until it kind of starts dripping out of the bottom, and that way you know you have enough. I used a little grease on the barrel up here, so I like to just put a little tab of grease on that, since that moves back and forth in the handle. Keeps that handle from wearing out, hopefully. And like I said, hopefully this will last another 50 years. And so next I'm going to take a look at some of the might take a look at the rear brakes, or either the wiring, because the headlight doesn't work on this and the horn doesn't work. I know the horn button in assembly is probably the problem, but I'm going to check the wiring in the headlight here, in the headlight bucket, see if all that wiring is there. I did, in pulling this handle out, pulled out the rear, the brake light plug, so I think that's inside this housing as well, so we'll take a look at that. Well, I was going to do a video on what I did to fix the brakes, or kind of do a step-by-step on fixing the rear brakes on it, but actually it was so easy that I'll just tell you what I needed to do. This piece here rides on the shaft, so when you squeeze the brakes, it slides and pulls on the shaft. All I had to do was lube it up, and now it works perfect. I did the same thing on the cable of just putting some chain wax down in the cable, and it works fine. So that was the only thing I had to do, is just lube this piece up right here where the little shaft rides, and now it's working fine. So and I was also going to do a video on the electrical problem, but with the headlight, but that was easy. I popped the cover off and the headlight was unplugged. So plugged it in, it's working. So far this bike hasn't had a whole lot wrong with it, other than, you know, the valve being too tight and the timing being off. I set both of those, and now it just runs. I'm gonna change the oil in it, and then decide what I'm going to do with this bike.